In this week's episode of Carlie's Couch, we talk about playing the victim. How often are we giving up our own power by playing the victim, and how can we change our victim mentality into one that is more empowering?
Ooh. Good morning. Hope you're doing well today. I know December, everybody's like excited about the holidays and or just kind of like chilling a little bit more as we get close to, or as we're getting closer to the holidays now. It's definitely a time where it's like, whew, I gotta take a rest. So please take care of yourselves, take a rest. We hope that you catch up on all the episodes of Carlie's Couch that you haven't listened to from this year. If you've missed any, take some time to leave a review. Like really leave a review, like write something out. Y'all leave a lot of good comments. So like, for example, here's a cheat code for you. Take one of those comments and then throw that into Apple Podcasts and use that as like a base for your review. And leave 5 stars when you can, just because that helps the rating of the show and to get in front of even more people. And also thanks for those who share it too.
Yeah, so shout out to Jermaine. Shout out to his comments. He always leaves some clever and funny things.
On the YouTube channel.
A whole latte plants. Be listening and interacting. I love it. And then also, like in the dating episode, one of my line sisters hit me and was like, yo, I'm reading this book. And this book is like reading the fuck out of me right now.
Yeah, that book does go hard. Attached. Yeah. So if you missed the dating episode, that one got a lot of play. Everybody loves like listening to about relationships and love and how to make some stuff work. So definitely gonna keep throwing those in there every once in a while.
Yeah, and also read the books that we recommend. Those are good. So if you're working on growing those things, I just started Attached too, so I'm sure it'll be reading me here pretty soon as well.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we can continue to grow as well is by changing this idea of always being a victim. And I'm going to paint the picture of like another person, because I feel like this is something that's easy to kind of point out in other people. When you notice somebody who always like has a complaint or like an excuse, or like, you know, it's always like this other person, or why don't this generalized group ever do boom, 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 or men are this, or the system's always trying to hold us down, conspiracy theorist type people, like folks who's like it seems like they're always in a space of talking about how they're being limited by the world. Raise your hand as if I can ever see in the comments or something if you know people like that, for sure. Now, Carlie, would you consider yourself to be like one of those?
No, and I'll sum that up with, and we'll talk about it later, but I'm very accountable for all my shit.
I be trying to think like for real though, because like I used to be like, no, don't have victim mentality, but I do remember and know where I have. And to your point, yes, like I very much now, and it's not always immediate, but like as soon as you are kind of in a space where it's like, men don't never blah, 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 or, you know, thinking about a specific relationship or something like that, where it's like, well, they did this and this and this, and they hurt me and all these things. I do kind of quickly like stop, like, all right, like, you know, sometimes you might have to marinate in it, but like stop. And then I think about like, all right, but I could have did this, or I did that, or I'm gonna move on, or whatever it might be. Right. So for those of you though, who may not even realize that you're in that space, and some of y'all must not, because when I hop online every time, like there's gonna be a few people on my timeline, like all they doing is like, you know, trust people when they tell you who they are the first time, and then the next tweet is now you know what I'm talking about. And the next tweet is you know, this why you don't let people in until you see who they really are. And like you be like, damn dog, like I know you going through something right now. And it's like certain people, it just seems like they're always going through something. That's kind of like what we talk about today, and like, you know, being able to note that and catch that, because also actually in a real life example, there's a situation that I know about where somebody like she does like she it's like text, and it's like you want to tell like, girl, you're not helping yourself right now by doing this, like, and it's almost like she can't control it, and like just very being extremely like led by emotion, and it's like, you did this, you did that, and you know, talking to a friend about it, it's just like, man, like you can't really tell that person like what to do in that case because they're not hearing you. But if you know there's something that maybe you have dealt with, and you're like, dang, I do that sometimes, or I get caught up in my feelings about something, or very passionate about a topic, being Black in America, all these types of things, then that's where we're talking to you about that today.
Yeah. And that the idea kind of came up through a conversation with a friend. And we were talking about a family member. We both have various family members that we feel are rooted, like they had real trauma in their life, but like now they're so led by, people are always out to get them. Like Lexi mentioned earlier, like it's like everything is a personal attack. Like anything that happens to them is kind of a personal attack and all this. And it became a conversation like, well, at what point, like, do people recognize that, yes, you had real trauma and now you're letting it run your life, and you're like, when do you transition from, a victim like of a wrongdoing that wasn't your fault, that something happened, to now you're choosing that role in all the situations that you bring in, and what can you do to do better? And also as a point that, Lexi asking me like, well, are there any places in your life, and we'll get into that, but I definitely have played the victim in the past for sure, and a lot of times you don't know. And so thinking about what the victim mentality is, do you have any other examples? So it's like people who believe life like happens to them, like everybody's kind of against them, out to get them perhaps.
Yeah, like you said, to me, you can think of any kind of like a traumatic thing that might have happened to somebody, but now it's like, and now imagine that they view everybody every day through that lens. And it's like, I view life through the lens that everybody's going to do what that person did, or that white people forever are going to treat me this way, or that there is no hope about XYZ, or like whatever it is. It's really about like seeing the world through that lens now. And it's just it just seems like a heavy way to live, and it's like you're gonna be constantly doing like these mental gymnastics to always deal with that. You're always having to deal with like that extra what do you call it, like not just anxiety, but kind of just being stuck in your head about everything. And it's almost like you're adding to everything around you. Sometimes it might be valid, but like it's like you're adding this extra layer to everything that, like, how it's like sometimes you just get tired and you don't know you've been thinking OD, but like when you think about it, you're like, dang, I didn't even do nothing today, I'm so exhausted. And it's like, but I was obsessively like thinking about something, or kind of going through something. And imagine like, just as I would say that somebody with a victim mentality would kind of move through life kind of feeling like that, like a lot of the time.
And I think it's important to realize that, most of people's victim mentality is rooted in real trauma. Not all the time, but most of the time there was probably something that happened, like husband cheated, dealing with racism, that's fucking real. Like, friend backstabbed them or stole from them, or, whatever happens. Like, I think it starts there, but to your point, it becomes an issue when it starts to be a lens into which you view the entire world.
Yeah, and that's when it becomes problematic, and it literally not healthy for you, and it's almost like you are kind of placing things on other people, putting them in boxes as well. This is really, this is what baggage is. So if you have a victim mentality, this is you having baggage from past issues, past relationships with family, friends, lover, whatever, and now you're holding on to it. So even though you may have been wronged, like Carlie said, it's like, how can we let go and separate what this person did, or separate what happened, or even like when it comes to like racism, because it's still happening. It's like, how do we even separate what is happening in a way that we can still live life to the fullest that we can? So how can we still be empowered? And to me, like, I guess one of the most unfortunate things about having a victim mentality is that it disempowers you so much, so that now, even though, yes, racism is real, or things have happened to me, it's almost like a whelp. Like, now there's nothing I can do, or well, I just have to deal with this. And so those are some of the things that kind of come up for you when you're in a victim mentality. But like to us, like that sounds like kind of negative, right? Like, oh man, I wouldn't want to be like that. But Carlie, like, why would somebody stay in a victim mentality then? Because to me, when I think of examples of people who I'm like, yeah, they kind of are in a victim mentality a little bit with certain things, it's like, well, they kind of live there. Why do you feel like they might be kind of stuck there?
I think one, they could be stuck in their ways, but I feel like the biggest one is probably that it's easier to blame everybody else around you. Like, oh, I didn't get that promotion because my boss hates me, and they never pick me for this because it's always people being mean to you or picking on you. It's so much easier. And that
becomes like nobody ever picks me.
Yeah, and then you start to deflect. Like, I feel like it's sometimes easier to deflect blame for things not going right in your life on other people than it is to like look at yourself and take ownership of that.
And then also along with that, I think that when you're the victim, now you're able to look at folks and you're kind of better than them. You might have like a more high ground, or I feel like because they did this, they did that. Like now I'm a good person. It's almost like you're able to like highlight yourself in a particular light because you're not the one who did that stuff. You're the one who's poor old me, like that everything has happened to.
And thinking about actually a personal thing, when I agreed to myself to be in this situationship off and on for like 5 years.
Damn.
Bruh.
That's how I be though. And it's so funny how like it's always the like unhealthy like situationships or like joints that like last forever. Like it's so hard to like dip out of those for whatever reason.
Yo, so many reasons. Situationships, a whole entire series of episodes. But this one in particular, like I realized that yes, he did like there was a wrongdoing on his part, but also that I was playing a victim because I was like leaning into being a victim in that relationship instead of like taking ownership of why I allowed myself to be in that situation, why I continued to choose him when he wasn't choosing me.
So that could be for everybody listening, that could be a point to think about. It's like, am I in a situation with a person or in some type of situation that I know is not good, but I'm having a hard time separating from or changing? That could be a signifier that, well, dang, what am I gaining out of like staying here? I'm not allowing myself to be with a better person. I'm not allowing myself to be in a better situation. I'm disempowering myself. Why? Or even like, what is that saying about you? So think about that. Like that may be a signifier that you may have a victim mentality in some case.
Yeah, anywhere you don't feel empowered to choose yourself or to do better or to own your wants and needs is huge. And I think that probably keeps people keeps a lot of people in a lot of situations that aren't necessarily the best for them.
Mm-hmm. So at what point is it become problematic if somebody really did something to you, right? Like, for example, racism in America, right? Like, okay, like there are accounts that we know and we see that can talk all day about what's going on around the country, and that we're not able to get to a certain level at the same rate, and with this and that and all these kind of things, right? But they're also true. So is that problematic, or like can you kind of dive into a little bit more like in situations like that where something has happened or maybe is even continuing to happen? At what point are we doing a little too much?
So I think it's hard not to internalize those situations, right? And it is very real and very disempowering on every scale. So not to minimize the impact that it has, but I think it becomes disempowering when you let that anger eat away at you and make you become bitter and make you feel disempowered and like you can't do anything, and like you kind of just complain more than you try to look for solutions or take action.
So I think that when you're complaining without having action, but I think sometimes it's like, all right, like there might not be an action, and or it's still valid even if you don't have an action. But if you're complaining and I think it's something else to it too. If you're complaining and it has become like your mask and like your, I don't know, like your
personality.
Yeah. Yeah. It used to be complaining as a personality. Then yeah, it's hard. I think it's kind of hard to like explain it for me. And I think that's mostly because like it is very overwhelming and it can be very frustrating to, in this case, like you are kind of a victim. But maybe it's and I think it kind of sucks because it seems like it's like, oh, you got to be a bigger person type thing. And I hate when people kind of say that, right? Like, yo, you got to go higher, be a bigger person in that situation when somebody or a society is not treating you like the way that you should be treated. But at the end of the day, it's always like and yet if I approach this from like, well, what can I do, or like, how can I still move through or whatever, you're still going to be in a better space, I guess, than to just state this and complain about this and say, well, you know, why is this the cards I was given type thing.
It sounds like from this discussion that the difference between being a victim of a wrongdoing and something happening to you, systemic racism, for example, and like the difference between being a victim and having a victim mentality is like the acceptance and the disempowerment, like the acceptance of disempowerment. So maybe, I'm not saying like don't talk about it, because it is important to talk about it. But if the talk is like, well, it's always going to be like this and it's not like we can do nothing about it, I think that that's a little bit different than like calling for action and you letting that. Like, and what I mean by calling for action is seeing what you can do wherever you are, seeing how you can empower yourself in spite of those circumstances, and not, what I'm not saying is pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because we all know that's bullshit. But what I am saying is like, I think it's like owning that disempowerment and accepting kind of things as like, that's how they are. Like, oh, the world's always going to be out to get me. And that just is what it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then, so for example, even with the racism example, now it's like I may walk into any room, and actually, so I have a real example of this with racism. So, child, one of these summers when I thought, oh, we really about to see some change when we was in the streets. 2020. Boy, was it just 2020? Yeah, like I was like, yo, this is about to be different a little bit, because I was like, hold up, now it's more white people at this march than black folks. But anyway, so like around this time of a space where I'm like, there was a lot of like unrest around these social issues. I went home to North Carolina, and so being in North Carolina, it's almost like because of the kind of environment in general, I was already kind of tight. Like I was like, all right, I'm going back home to North Carolina. You know, I know there's a house a little down the street from where we live where they have this huge, like, it's so ignorant for no fucking reason, like big Confederate flag, like for no reason, right? And so, like, I'm already tight going home, and, like, I expect people to say something. And so I noticed that when I was out and about, when I'm, you know, as I'm walking past and I see a white person walk past me, I literally was expecting some bullshit or, like, you know, just something. I was waiting for people to be rude or kind of whatever. And it was so interesting how I was like, damn, everybody was extra super nice. And like, I mean, these older like white lady, I'm like, hey, how you doing? And like just talking to you. And then in my head, I was like, hold on, who am I like serving or helping by going in expecting that negativity? Like I said, I keep saying tight because like I was tight. Like I was like, oh, let me gotta be prepped to fight, or like prepped to say what I need to say or whatever. And like who am I helping by like being like that? And then whole time it's like, oh, like that's not even what that is. And so it's like almost mentally I was doing myself a disservice. Physically I was doing myself a disservice. And that don't mean you know you gotta stay ready, you know, in case something does go down. But how much better would the experience have been being out and about if I'm out and I'm expecting a, hey, how you doing? Or wave at somebody and cheery. But then when that maybe one out of 100,000 people does say something cool, as opposed to, oh, you better not say, oh, okay, that's what I thought. Oh, you about to do da 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 da. And now you're in a whole different space. So that's, I think, like a actually real good example of, okay, if I'm in a victim mentality, I'm already hurting whether somebody actually does anything or not. But if you're not, you only actually getting hurt when you're actually really getting hurt. So I think that's the biggest like differentiator of that for real. Like you're letting yourself be hurt unnecessarily.
Yeah, I think what's the quote? It's like worrying about something. It's like you already suffer a thousand times before the thing happens or not. Like my therapist always says that. He's like, yo, you worrying about this situation and you feeling all these emotions and going all up and down. He was like, and the thing may or may not happen, but you've already felt those emotions. And if it happens, you're going to feel them again.
And to feel them is literally to your body and to your mind as if it's happening. So yeah, that's why like technically and health wise, like that's just not good for you.
And I think that's why it's so important to talk about this and why I specifically thought about it, because like it having a victim mentality affects your life on so many levels. Whenever you live in that constant state of worry and stress, it like kills your immune system and your body's ability to like fight off things. It makes you so anxious so that you're not even able to show up as your full self in any situation that you're in. Like, it's so important to notice where you're giving your power away or owning this narrative so that you can take it back and like live a more peaceful existence.
And you see and experience what you expect to see and experience. So you at least you would do more for yourself to try to have a different expectation. So are you a victim, or do you have a victim mentality? You may have a victim mentality if you're consistently complaining about a same thing. This could be maybe a person, it could be a situation, even like with your job or something. Like, you know, if you're always like, oh, here come my boss, like, and nobody likes their boss, but except for other people who work with me. But you know, if you're consistently complaining about something specific, and also that makes me think too, you know, there's some things that every time you see a person, they say the same thing all the time.
Every time.
And you could tell that's just almost ingrained in you. And you be like, damn, here we go. Like, I know, you know, you better not blah, blah, blah. Or like, you be like, damn, you really say this every time. And you're like stuck in this train of thought. To me, those are like example of a victim mentality if you're consistently complaining about it.
Another one is always catastrophizing all your problems. And what I mean is like something little happens, but all something is so big, and then you start relating it to other things, and it's just part of this big conspiracy where things are against you if like little tiny things are always like much bigger things. Like even thinking about it when you drive, and if somebody gets over, people always cutting you off, people always don't know how to drive, people this and that. Think about that too. And I'm also talking to myself in that, because Lord knows driving is the hardest mindful activity that I do.
Yeah, that's funny. I always laugh like now when I'm driving, because I always think about something I saw on the internet where it's like, yeah, anytime you the one like sitting in your car, you be like, you better not hit my car. But it's like every time you're the person driving it, man, I ain't finna hit your car. Like, so it's like depending on what section you're in, like you gonna do that every time, like every time. Another signifier that you maybe have a victim mentality is if it's always somebody else's fault. If it's consistently like when you're hurting or when something's going on, it's always somebody else's fault. Or if you kind of feel like everybody's out to get you. But to show like a real example of that, because somebody might not be like, yeah, I don't think everybody's out to get me. But like I had a colleague with work, and it's like, no matter, I know like my intent was not, you know, to hurt anybody's feelings or to, you know, to do anything like negatively. And yet I could just ask a question like, hey, you know, I got an email, they're asking about XYZ. Have you guys already figured that piece out? Or do you know the answer so I can pass them on to you? And I'm asking this question because I don't want to double work of like sending it to them if they already might have did it, like because they were going to be doing this stuff. So I was like, oh, did you already do that? Or what should I lead them to? And then it's just like, oh, well, I don't work for you. And like, they're doing all this stuff. And like, she just assumes everybody's like out to get her, and like assuming that I was like always trying to like put her beneath me. And it's like, no, like I'm not doing any of that. I'm just asking you a question, to try to help. Or for example, in the same scenario, it's like upset because if I didn't CC you in every single email, but to me, I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to save your inbox. So this literally has nothing to do with you, or it's literally not important, or, you know, it's like, why? But because everybody's out to get me, or you might be trying to steal like my business from up underneath me or whatever. Why are you not keeping me in the loop on this? And I'm like, girl, I just responded yes to an email. Like, if you want to be CC, cool. But, and then to appease that situation, like I would do the best I could to like really try to overly like communicate and do the things. But no matter what I would do, it was always through that lens. So it's like at some point I was like, you can't win because you choose to see everything through a lens that people are out to just take your job or to get you or whatever.
Man, and that's the biggest thing. You're choosing to see through this lens. And so you can also choose to change it, which is important and why I'm excited about doing this episode. But the last example of that is there's this TikTok where it's like two people texting. It's a guy and a girl. And the girl is like, or the guy's like, yeah, you can come over if you want to. But he's like saying it in the tone he was like, yeah, you can come over if you want to. And she read it, you can come over if you want to. So she's getting hype. And so he's laying there and he's like, yeah, oh, and maybe we could get some food or something. But then she's like taking it this whole way, and then
that's funny.
She's
that's
like, oh, you're a treat, and he's like, oh, she thinks I'm a treat, and she's like, raw, and he's just like laughing and like, which you like never know, but it's the way, it's like your perceived lens of whatever conversation is going on. So if you find yourself doing that, like with your friends, like thinking that people are coming at you crazy, or your boo or your people you're dating, if you always feel like they're like shuffling you off to the side or not paying you attention, if it's always you, it's most likely. If it's always everybody else, it's most likely always you. Yeah,
that's similar to like me expecting people to be looking at me a certain way. And it's like this person was going into the conversation kind of expecting to read like they were getting disrespected or being tried in that way. That's just interesting. And also kind of similarly like with the example that you just gave, if you are always making assumptions about like how that person feels. Like, for example, in reading a text. So I sometimes will challenge myself like not to like put extra things in context if I don't really know the context. So if I get like a dry text or something, or they're responding mad late or something like that, instead of like, oh, never text me back, or like get into kind of a victim mentality, it's like, okay, maybe they're actually they might be ironing a shirt, doing this, talking on the phone, whatever. And it's like, to them, it's like, yo, I went out of my way to make sure I sent that quick, like, okay, cool. And to you, you're like, oh, okay, cool. And that's really like, they were actually going out of their way to kind of send that at the time, and you don't know. So like, sometimes you don't know the context. It's like, why imagine that instead of just being like, or at least even asking or to get clarification, or, just being like, hey, why'd you just say, okay, cool. Like, are you not free to talk right now or something, or whatever? I don't know. Exploring it more. Like, don't make assumptions.
Being curious. That is a great way to approach any of these.
And yeah, curious and open to things could be not what you're just thinking. I mean, in all of this, like, just because, things are going on, social unrest or whatever, like, you can't make that assumption about everybody, or because of you've been done wrong before, whatever. You can't assume every woman is doing XYZ behind your back. Like, so you still have to be able to maintain a fresh perspective and a fresh lens of the world around you, which is hard.
It is, and it's because we've all like actually had things happen to us. Like, that's where all of this stems from. But it's choosing to have that fresh perspective. Another sign that you might be a victim or looking at life through a victim mentality is like you feel stuck and always have a laundry list of reasons why things can't and will not change or work out for you. And I think we all know those people, or have been maybe those people. It's like, oh, I can't quit my job because of this and this and this, and then this happened, and then this, which is real because you might actually have to pay bills or whatever. But like, oh, I can't stop smoking because of this, or oh, I wish I could do better, but this.
Yeah, the first thing I think about with that is like kind of those older people who are like, well, my leg, or I can't go to this, or I can't do, and you're like, dang, this is depressing. Like, and again, like some of that stuff might be valid, but it's like it's depressing because like it seems like that's how they always talk. Like, oh, this, or like a Eeyore type of character. Another thing that I think is a good signifier is if you have trouble being assertive, because that shows like you're letting life happen to you, and you're not accepting that you could control life. Because I guess if you accept that you could control life, now everything's not everybody else's fault and everything's not the world's fault. Like, oh, I could actually do something. But in choosing to be a victim, you're being very passive about life, and you're letting kind of life take you down the river instead of you having an oar and like paddling the direction you want to go.
And that's huge, because if you're giving your power away, so you're feeling powerless, you might not feel empowered enough to ask for what you want or to stand up for yourself. So instead of like being direct with people, you find yourself like manipulating them to get what you want, or, trying to be coercive and doing underhanded because that's how you feel like the only way you can get the things that you need.
Yeah, and I think another big thing too, like with folks who have a victim mentality, a big common denominator is insecurity, maybe low confidence, low self-esteem, and being insecure. Because again, that all kind of goes into a space of being disempowered, and not giving yourself the credit that you could have in life, like to move forward with things.
Because you really are the creator of your own reality. I also think it's important to point out, like, something that we said is like, if you're complaining but never doing anything, you might have a victim mentality. But taking action isn't always a sign that you don't have a victim mentality. And like, what I mean is, like, you can leave a toxic relationship and still have a victim mentality, because then you could be like, well, all men are dogs and all they want me for is my body and this and this. And you can still keep that victim mentality, but still have taken the action to leave a relationship.
So let me make sure I'm get clear what you're saying. So what you're saying right now is it's possible to take action and you could still be having a victim mentality.
Absolutely. And so I gave the example.
Because you still see that lens through everybody else. Even if you left the person, like, you expect your next guy is going to, oh, he probably doing this. He gonna probably do me wrong too. Or you just like that or whatever. And that goes back to what we were saying about, like, what's unfortunate is now you have this baggage and now you're seeing the world through this particular lens. So until you change that lens, you're still living like in a victim mentality.
And it's like a self-imposed prison. So yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
And so now that we know, like, some things that show that you're living with the victim mentality or signifiers of that, like, how can you become the hero in your own life and free yourself from these limitations?
I'm actually like really excited about this part of this episode because, like we said, victim mentality is, I think this is a little challenging because, like we said, it is stemmed in, you know, something has happened to you and or things happen in life, or there are circumstances and things that are unjust, et cetera, et cetera. And so in this case, it's like, what are the things that I could do to have more power over my life? And so one of the first things I would say, similar to how when we've had conversations about emotions or dealing with discomfort. So in this case, you're uncomfortable. You feel some kind of way. You're dealing with something, right? Whether that stems from the insecurity or stems from the exact hurt or whatever, like you're dealing with some pent up stuff. And I think that in this case, you don't have to act like you weren't hurt. Or you don't have to act like that thing didn't happen. So let's say, for example, I might be in a victim mentality and I'm triggered that, like, oh, well, this guy's treating me really good. Like he might actually be somebody that I end up with. But you know how guys do, like they always gonna mess up at someone, which shit, they do. Damn. That's just a matter of fact, but you know how guys do. They always gonna mess stuff up. I don't know. I shouldn't even. And then you start self-sabotage or whatever, right? So let's say you're going down like a road like that. Maybe that's where you can catch that and stop to like validate yourself. Like, you know what? Tyrone really did. You know, he did put me through the ringer, but now I can sit here and think about the fact that what was that situation? How did that make me feel? That made me feel terrible. Like I felt like I wasn't important. I felt like, you know, this or that. And let yourself sit in it for real. And ask yourself questions. Let yourself explore it. Maybe write it or journal it down, to where I feel like sometimes when you spend some time with your emotions, the emotions start to turn into more of a logic where it's like, all right, but that was Tyrone. Let me try to think a little bit differently about this situation, or, you know, let me not go into it like that. Maybe you can get to that after you let yourself validate that you did go through something, or validate that something is happening in your life. And so I like that, the idea of processing when you catch that moment of complaining or catch that moment of being in a victim mentality.
And I think that's so important. Like, we don't talk about, like, yes, the thing happened, and yes, it was terrible, and it shouldn't have happened to you. And, you know, we don't allow ourselves to grieve or to own those feelings, or to own, you know, whatever happens. And so starting with, you know, validating yourself, giving yourself space, because the world is not going to give you that. So you have to make sure you do it for yourself.
And I think it's so weird how like that works. Like I do it much more lately. I think I started kind of trying to do that when it came to emotions. Wow, and I was just about to say, remember when I didn't used to know my feelings? And that's already like a progress. I'm like, oh, I be knowing my feelings now. But like if I'm feeling sad or like feeling something, and it really does like do something. It really does like move through you. And then at the end, you really like, well, like that was that thing. And you feel lighter, and you feel like a little more like refreshed, like you're just not holding on to it. So I think it really does feel good to feel sad or feel bad for the moments that you need to, because then you're like, well, ran out. Like, it just runs out. And then you're like, okay. And now you keep moving on.
Emotions are energy in motion. They get blocked if you don't allow yourself to feel them. So go ahead and do that. Start there. And whenever you do this journaling or talking with, trusted like support group or your therapist or something, then you can start to like look at where you can control what you can control in your life, because inevitably we can't control things from happening to us as much as we would like to try. Like, you can't control somebody hurting your feelings or the economy or war or whatever's going on in the world. You can't control that. But you can start to take accountability for like what is in your sphere of control and then moving forward with that. So for example, like racism is real, and that is something that nobody can deny. Like it is what it is, but you can't let it overwhelm you to the point where you feel disempowered and hopeless and falling into despair, because that's kind of what they want to happen. But what you can do is, like, let's say you live in Texas, and Texas is Texas, but they're also trying to ban all these books in school from telling what really happened. I remember there was something a few years ago where they were trying to call slaves servants. And I was like, the fuck?
Right. I'm trying to sugarcoat this.
Like, let's not. I have a whole story about that, about going to visit my dad when he was on base in Missouri. And they called them house servants. And I was like, you mean slaves? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, we're going to use the right words here. And my dad was looking at me like, oh my God.
Mm. And that's what's important too. And like, all of this is like naming what things are, and like, we're not trying to hide from them. Let's be honest and truthful about what it is, but it's also not honest and truthful when you see everything through that lens. It's also not honest and truthful, right? Just like them trying to sugarcoat that is not honest and truthful. So I think it really is about what, like, the truth of the situation in those cases. But I like that, and I like how you're saying, like, there's things you can do that's actionable, but that don't mean you have to go, walk Selma and all of that. Like, it doesn't mean that, but I can choose to let me smile at every person I'm about to walk by. And they probably won't have anything happen, because that's kind of the choice I'm making, even on a very smaller scale. That would make my day much better than making assumptions as I'm walking down the street all day. So I like that one a lot. And then I think a huge part of it is forgiveness. And nobody likes talking about forgiveness. We had an episode on forgiveness where we went through this and talked about how it's healing for you. And, when you're really, really, really deep in victim mentality, or when you're really deep in hurt, like, nobody wants to hear about forgiving anybody. But it truly is an exercise that lightens your shoulders. There's a study I was just reading about the other day, actually. I wasn't prepared for this, but there's a study I was reading the other day where whoever, scientists, and like, they put this stuff all in your brain and in your body and stuff, were tracking, they were tracking the brains of folks, and they said it literally, when they practice this forgiveness, like visualizing a person's situation, forgiving it, like honoring it and then forgiving it, that literally they were able to like jump higher, move more. Like it was almost like it was just like how physically they were lighter. And to the point where this is something that they said athletes were starting to be like, yo, like, I want to learn this and figure out this whole like forgiveness exercise, because they wanted to be able to like just be even more lighter and free or whatever. And so it's like, how interesting is that it like literally on your body is good for you to practice those things, to take that kind of like weight off of your mind and off your shoulders in that way. But forgiveness of others, again, always have to remember that that's not saying like validating what they did. It's not saying it was okay. It's simply saying that you're choosing to let that go and move on from it. And a lot of times I think it's very important to mention that the biggest person that you have to forgive a lot of times is yourself. When we need to forgive decisions that we made, or when we didn't listen to ourselves about that 20-year situationship Carlie was in, or like, because it's like, like, dang, I knew I seen all the red flags, but I thought I was going to do this, thought I was going to change something, whatever. And sometimes that's the hardest person to forgive is yourself. But imagine the lightness that you could feel, and the accountability that in forgiving yourself, that's kind of taking you out of that victim mentality, because it's not all about like what everybody else is doing. It's like, you know what, I did make a bad decision or whatever, but I am not going to live with that feeling and that shame or whatever. I'm going to move forward. So that all of that is very important. And I think those three things are like huge, huge keys in moving forward out of a victim mentality.
And I love how the underlying thread in a lot of these is about ownership, like taking accountability, like for yourself, for your emotions, for what happened. And again, forgiveness is not acceptance. So do not confuse the two, because they're absolutely not the same. But, you know, you deserve to not have to carry all that stuff around, or not have to look at the world through that lens of everybody, you know, hurting you and doing that. Like, that sucks that happened. And also, like, you can choose to live life different. I like something that Lexi mentioned whenever we were like talking about the episode and like preparing it. And that was like, you know, stopping yourself before you speak. Like, even when you tweet, like if you're looking at your social media and you notice that you always putting out the same kind of content about something, kind of stopping and being like, oh man, like where is this victim mentality lingering in my everyday actions and in my speech and how I'm moving?
Yeah, I would say ask yourself all the time, like, who hurt me? Because that's actually a real exercise. Who talks about that? I want to say, what's that guy's name? Stefan Speaks, maybe. He talks about that as like an exercise of, and this kind of goes back into the forgiveness, but he's like, go down like on a piece of paper, literally write down everybody who's like has hurt you, and then you're literally like kind of writing something to them, and it's like, all right, let me rewrite it, not to even send them, but just to process things. And it's like all about asking yourself, like, who hurt me? Like, when something's going on and you're immediately going into victim mentality, or if I'm really about to tweet like, you know, this, that, like, what's really going on here? And just stopping and taking a moment to even at least note that, right? And then I was laughing with her, 'cause I was like, yeah, and then write that in your journal, because like my friend was getting on me about the stuff I'd be saying sometimes, and I'm like, no, that's not that. But then I was like, nah, I probably was thinking about some shit, or, you know, the person or whatever when I might have wrote that. And it's like, maybe that's an opportunity for me to like get that down instead of trying to get bars off on Twitter.
So put that in your journal. Hit us at Carlie's Couch. Let us know where you might notice victim mentality in your own life and your own tweets. You know, who hurt you? Hit us. Let us know.
And it's usually like the people close to you. It could be like your parents, because it's like, dang, y'all, they kind of might have let you down. And so you may have a valid victim mentality because of that. Like, they weren't there for you or whatever happened. It could have been Tyrone. It could be you. It could be the weather in Florida, because dang, all these hurricanes every year, and it's like victim mentality of that. Like, it could literally be so many things, but it's like, okay, now what? You know what I mean? Like, with life, we have to continue to ask, okay, but now what? And like, whether that's taking control of how you process it, how you think about it, or taking a literal action, there's always something that you can do to at least live a lighter, more like fulfilled life, even despite these things.
And it's beautiful, because that's always your choice. It's always available to you. Hit us at Carlie's Couch. Let us know what stood out to you. Share this with a friend. And then also leave us a review so we can read them on the next episode. And we also need some shout outs. So hit us. Let us know what amazing things you're doing, books you dropping, courses you have, amazing things that are popping. And then this week's question of the week. Lex, what would you ask a 60-year-old version of yourself?
Like, if I was looking at them right now.
Yeah, like as yourself, and you got to talk to her, what would you ask? One thing.
I would ask a 60-year-old version of myself, I would ask how I should approach, maybe, what do you wish you had, damn, it's kind of weird. What do you wish you had did that I could be doing now differently with relationships? And not even necessarily romantic relationships, but I think people really are the most important thing in your life. And I think that as people get older, they tend to, like, the things that they're like, oh, I wish this or whatever, are about like how they maintained or whatever, did things with their relationship. So I would ask her that, so that I could continue to think about that now.
Oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good one. I add that to my list. But mine is, I would ask her like what her biggest regret is? Like, what is the one thing that she wish she would have done?
Yeah, but you better hope it's not something behind you that you can't help anyway.
I'm about to say, yeah. I'm about to look. Well, I'm hoping that it's not.
Look, I should ask, so what are these stocks looking like?
You right? What's the
Answer me
lotto
this.
numbers for 2023?
Right. What was that Powerball number? Do you recall? Yes. Shoot. Yeah, we need to get paid. We definitely have a Back to the Future moment. I love that movie, actually, by the way.
You need to watch it.
Yeah, Back to the Future is a good movie. Shout out Michael J. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't be a victim. Choose to be empowered and choose to live an empowering life. And yeah, let's think about how we can do things differently so that we can live the life we want to live.
Drops mic. Bye, y'all.
Peace.